Let's now identify some situational triggers of ethical fading that are relevant to negotiations. First, recall that loss frames promote risk-seeking and gain frames promote risk aversion. Applied to ethical decision-making, research has shown that a loss frame increases negotiators' unethical behavior, with these negotiators being more likely to gather insider information and lie than those in a gain frame. However, this effect only occurred when negotiators were under time pressure and was eliminated entirely when time pressure was removed. What this means for you is that when you are under time pressure and thus have limited cognitive resources to consider framing effects, you are more vulnerable to them. Other research has shown that merely labeling an economic game the Wall Street game resulted in less generosity than when the identical game was labeled the community game. This competitive framing effect occurs because the words Wall Street convey information about the kind of game that is being played, and most people associate Wall Street with Madoff-like behavior rather than Mother Teresa-like behavior. More generally, negotiators use more unethical strategies when they perceive a negotiation to be a fight, because it enables them to rationalize the behavior needed in a dog-eat-dog world. A third trigger of ethical fading is a salient power dynamic between negotiators. First, negotiators with high power tend to bluff and lie more than negotiators with low power. This happens because power can drive risk-taking and a sense of entitlement, which licenses the use of deception in negotiators' minds. Some research suggests that as individuals rise in rank in organizational hierarchies, they identify more with the organization and thus become blinded to its unethical practices. One way to avoid falling prey to this ethical trap when you find yourself in a powerful position is to frame power in terms of social responsibility. For example, one study found that high-power decision-makers who had 100% of the power in a situation were less selfish in how they allocated resources than when they only had 90% of the power in the situation and their negotiating partner had 10%. The researchers found that when the opponent was obviously powerless, the powerful felt more responsibility to take care of them. Ethical fading is also triggered by anonymity. In research that I conducted with Alex Van Zandt, we brought participants into the lab and told them that they would engage in a one-shot strategic game with another research participant, and that their payment would depend on the choices made by both players. We gave participants an opportunity to lie to the other participant, who was actually a research confederate, in an attempt to earn more money. Before doing so, we manipulated whether they would communicate face-to-face or anonymously. We found that people have a hard time lying to another person's face, in part because lying to another person's face raises both awareness of their own moral self and the possibility that their lies will be scrutinized, thus preventing ethical fading. By contrast, when the communication between participants occurred behind the veil of anonymity, ethical fading enabled participants to lie more to each other. A fifth trigger of ethical fading is negotiating in teams. Individuals within groups typically experience a bias called the diffusion of responsibility, which is the absence of feeling responsible for behavior because so many other people are involved. Not only do judgments of the other party become more extreme in teams, but teams tend to divide tasks into small pieces, which can prevent team members from seeing the bigger picture of their actions, thus making corruption and unethical behavior harder to spot. Finally, using agents to represent clients can promote communication distortion, additional complexity, increased costs, and increased deception. Agents feel pressure to reach a good deal for their clients and may experience displacement of responsibility, which is a bias that enables ethical fading by attributing the responsibility to the client, who may have implicitly or explicitly condoned ethically questionable negotiating tactics. Some have argued that using agents is a deliberate strategy that organizations use to put some distance between themselves and their corrupt dealings. When you are tempted to use an agent, make sure it is for the right reasons. That is, because you want to take advantage of their expertise, their social network, and/or their emotional detachment from the situation. And not because you see them as willing to use negotiating tactics that you personally wouldn't deploy. If you are asked to be an agent to someone else, you want to ask yourself if your interests are truly aligned and whether you'd be comfortable if your negotiating tactics were secretly recorded and then aired on the nightly news. By being mindful of each of these triggers of ethical fading, you are going to be in a better position to live up to your values and ideals.